happy Just the Tip Tuesday. We are looking at downward facing dog today, and this pose is, depending on who you ask, totally used for different things. Sometimes you'll hear it called a resting pose, LOL. Sometimes you'll hear it referenced to being, in service to stretching the calves or in service to stretching the hamstrings. Some teachers will tell you to roll your armpits in, some roll your armpits out for different variations on what we're looking for the shoulders. So this pose has a lot of function and utility, and I'm not really going to take an opinion today on what or how you should do it, but rather ways to explore it, because everybody's anatomy is different and every day in your practice is different. So you may want one type of down dog for one day and a different type of down dog for the other. So we're calling this practice Walk Your Dog. And really this is more like you're going to the Humane Society, you're trying to find your dog. And if you're lucky enough, you have a whole farm and you keep all of them on your land. So let's walk our dogs today. You will need a couple of props, a chair of some sort, a large pillow called a bolster or just a couch cushion works, a blanket, a towel works as well, and 2 blocks, or you can have evenly stacked books will work as well. So we're going to go ahead and hop into our first downward facing dog, which is on the chair. So if you find it difficult to weight bear on your wrists and on your hands, then you can use a chair instead. And it's a great pose for anyone. So we're going to bring our hands to the back of the chair. We're going to start to walk back with our booty and let our head drop in between our arms. So my hands are about shoulder width. I might even slide them out wider depending on how broad my shoulders are. You'll notice I've got a gentle bend in my knees, but if you want more of a back bend, you can really bend the knees, tip the tail. So just kind of playing around with where your hamstrings are at, where your back is at. And then just hanging out here for a couple of breaths. So if I were to move this to the floor, it'd be the exact same shape, only I've got a lot of support from gravity in my legs to really release the chest. Really release through the upper back. Let's take a few more breaths here. Then we're going to make our way down onto our mat in our first no prop downward facing dog. So first coming to a tabletop position, often we'll come into downward facing dog from tabletop. I want you to watch what happens there for me. So shoulders over wrists, hips over knees as I press back to downward facing dog. For me, that's a fairly shallow down dog just because I got some long legs. But let's hang out here for a second, just do some inventory for you. How does that work? Again, same principle from the chair. Let's play around with bending our knees, really anteriorly tipping that tailbone, that pelvis, so that we can stretch through the back side of the body. And then once we've gotten our belly closer to our thighs, maybe start to straighten the legs. And if you notice, as I do that, my pelvis almost comes automatically into more of a posterior tilt. Why that matters is it changes the access to the stretch of the hamstrings. Not right, wrong, good, bad, just something to discover, to play around with. So play around with a few more breaths of tipping the tailbone, bending the knees, straightening the legs. It is not the primary goal of the pose to get the heels to the ground. Some teachers will say that, but that just might not be in your anatomy. But for shits and giggles, let's see if we can peel the toes off the mat and really move towards the heels to or toward the ground. For some of you, that's going to be easy. For others of us, we're going to shop for more of like a miniature Shih Tzu. So I'm shortening the stance, walking my hands towards my feet to be able to get the heels to the ground. Trying to lift the toes to also stretch deeper into the Achilles. Activating through this front side of my shins. Take one more breath here. Now let's play around with lengthening the stance. And if you need to come down to your knees for a second, do so. This is also great preparatory work for inversions. So as I walk my hands further away from my heels and make much more of a lengthened stance, I might find that I can get a deeper back bend or a deeper shoulder opener. And I can test what that length is by coming down to my hands and knees. And now you'll notice that my tabletop, my knees are no longer underneath my hips, my wrists are no longer fully underneath my shoulders. So something to calibrate and play with. Let's take a few more breaths here. That's great as well. Just take a little back bend, bringing the fingertips behind you, squeezing the shoulder blades together, lifting the sternum, taking the gaze up. So again, today we're just playing and exploring with our downward facing dog. It's something that we do so often in class, and maybe we just get kind of married to one idea, but again, you might need a different kind of dog for different, it's like therapy dogs, different kind of day. So we're gonna take blocks now, and we're gonna place those underneath our hands. So if you're someone who feels a great deal of load on your shoulders, or you're struggling to get that stretch across the top of the shoulder or the chest, you might play around with this to create more space for your shoulders to move through. So hands are gonna come to the blocks. My thumb and pinky are kind of gripping the outside as I walk myself back. And then again, you can probably notice I've got a nice deep stretch here. The blocks are shoulder width or wider, but I've lost a lot in my hamstring. So for me, now I can get my heels down because I've created space. I'm not getting as big of a stretch in my hamstrings. This is a great option if I want to get into those shoulders. Another thing we can try is grabbing the sides of the mat. So if you've got wrist issues, grabbing the sides of the mat, maybe even taking the feet as wide as the mat, really playing around with that. So I'm doing less of that full palm planting and more like I'm ripping the mat apart. Which again gives me a nice stretch in the shoulders, the upper neck. Maybe take a couple of breaths there. And then slowly lowering down. Now I always LOL at the people who say like downward facing dog is a rest pose because I've never experienced that. But if you're someone who's been practicing for a while or you want to use down dog in service to building some core, we can take a blanket, pair of socks, or a towel on a slippery floor and just move our dog off of our mat. And so let's try that same variation where we started in tabletop, shoulders over wrists, hips over knees. I'm going to tuck my toes, lift my hips, and already I'm sliding back. So now I'm actively having to use my core to hold myself in this position. You'll notice my heels are not anywhere near the ground. I'm not anywhere near as deep of a back bend or shoulder opener, but I've got a hell of a good twitch going on in my belly. Hold that for 3. Okay, 2, and 1. Slowly coming out. Last prop I'll offer is the couch cushion or bolster. This is great if you do want to move more towards like a resting downward facing dog, but you want a little bit more than the chair. So most restorative version in this context would be using the chair, and I say restorative meaning like rest, not like the actual style of yoga. This is going to give us something to actually give another feedback point to, which will help us relax a bit in the pose. It can feel a little jarring on the neck, so just be conscious. And we're going to bring our hands wider than our shoulders, so about to the outer edges of the mat. The goal is to get my head to touch the bolster and then draw the crown of the head down into it. So now I'm doing a lot less work with my arms, and I feel this really nice stretch through the backs of the legs, the hamstrings, the glutes. Just a little more passive. So once you've got into that stretch, just hang out there. And then slowly lowering back down, pausing on our heels. Let's go ahead and take the hands behind us, interlace the hands, stretching the knuckles back, just taking a counter stretch to our shoulders there. Downward facing dog is such a useful pose. You can get so much out of it just depending on how you lengthen or shorten the stance, depending on what props you use. I invite you to play around with props in your own practice to see what feels best to you, or playing around with width of stance, hand grasp, so that you start to walk your dog in the setting or the scenery that you need for your individual practice that day. So happy practicing. Namaste.